You are now listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc, sharing insights through real, honest, and practical ways to improve your communication and relationships. Featuring your hosts, Dr. Pamela Kreiser, Meredith Edwards-Nagel, and Teighlor Polindo. Okay, we're doing another AFAF rewind. We're going back to episode 58. It's called Keeping Your Cool, How to Control Your Emotions So They Don't Control You. And yeah, I found this one very helpful because this is something I need all the time in my life, right? Trying to teach it, trying to learn it. But I think most of us don't like feeling out of control or just don't want to deal with the aftermath of when you've lost control, maybe. So this is an episode where we're going to learn some tools. Here's a little clip where TalkDoc teaches us some strategies on how to keep our cool.
Is there nothing we can do about the sensation that you're saying, this out of body, out of control thing? Or are we stuck with this?
Yes and no, I would say. I think the initial sensation is we can't do anything about. That's the onset of this emotional experience. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a way to stop that. I would love to plan my life so that that doesn't happen. There's no way to do that. Yeah. So you can't plan your way out of it, I don't think. I love what Marc Brackett says, and remember, he's the author of Permission to Feel, and he says this quote, I think Mike Tyson had it right when he said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Brackett continues and says, what's true in the boxing ring is true everywhere else. It's easy to say that from now on, we'll master our emotional responses until our significant other or child or neighbor or boss triggers us with one word or a look, and all our training goes out of the window. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have any suggestions here, of course, on this episode, but we do want to acknowledge what you're saying, Meredith, which is, can we just get rid of this part of being human? Wouldn't that be nice? And the answer is, I don't think we can. I think we're stuck with it.
Okay, so just recently, 2 times, maybe in this last week, something just flew out of my mouth, and I was like, wow, that was surprising. That's what they talk about when you think after you're speaking. It doesn't happen to me often. I was like, yeah, what are these strategies if we're not going to be able to not do it? Do we have strategies? How do we keep it in, cool it down? I don't know. Help me.
Oh, I love that. Keep it in, cool it down. I mean, this is about keeping our cool, right?
Yeah.
So there's actually a few strategies. And the good news is, as I kind of researched for this episode, there's a lot of agreement actually on it.
Oh,
so
nice.
Yeah. The first thing that I would say is common among several people, Brackett, some others, as they're talking about, what to do here. The first suggestion is don't try to outrun the emotion. You got to stop and notice the sensation. Brené Brown talks about this. She says people try to numb these emotions, especially when they're negative, because who wants to feel those things? So we'll get to that in a minute, because I'm not saying it's fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Brackett would say it's necessary. He says instead of numbing or outrunning it, stop for a minute, notice what it is. I really adopted, I would say, in the last 10 years or so. I definitely do this strategy. I have a thing I call my presence and absence test that I say to myself. This is the moment where you get a sensation where you're feeling something, but I'm not entirely sure about it. Maybe you have sick in your gut.
Okay.
And that's a tough one, right? Because you're like, I want to notice it, but I don't even know what's going on. So what I do is I ask myself a series of questions. So I'll say, okay, so what is this? When did this start? When wasn't I experiencing it? And how am I feeling it now? So that's my presence and absence test. Because what happens, I'll find in that sequence, is that I'll experience this sickness in my gut or something like that. And I'll go back through the things that happened right before that feeling onset happened. And I can identify where that came from more easily because I went through the sequence of when it was present and when it was absent.
Okay.
That's kind of my strategy. And that's one of the big recommendations of many of the researchers in this area. First tip, notice the sensation. Try to figure out what's going on with it. Now, the second one is the really common one. What were you going to say, Teighlor?
That's checking in with your body, the physical.
Yeah. Okay. Checking in. You're not doing the full identification necessarily, but just understanding something's going on. And we're going to stop and acknowledge it and try to see what's there for a sec.
So it's the ability to do that is not just innate. That's it feels like you have to I'm thinking of a sports analogy or getting in shape. It sounds like something you have to train.
Practice,
I need to train my mind to do this. This is not just going to be the gut thing that happens when I have this reaction.
Yeah.
So
Okay. The second strategy they talk about is to work on the de-escalation of your body response. A lot of people say breathe.
As I take a giant breath.
Yeah, she's already triggered, so she's taking a giant breath right now. It's funny because as we're talking about this research, I think a lot of people think, oh, breathe, kind of like calm down. And that's not actually why we breathe.
Calm down. I can't handle that one. So you got to
that doesn't help anyone, right? Keep their cool. Hey, don't lose it. The thing to remember is that when you and I get this sensation, it has triggered our sympathetic nervous system response. That's that response that says, oh my gosh, something's going on, that triggers that fight or flight that we talked about earlier. What we need, though, is we don't need more agitation. We need less agitation. What the researchers say is you got to trigger the other response, the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. How do you do that? One of the fastest ways to do it is to take some deep breaths. Brackett also says you can count to 10. You can do something that will slow that down. Identify the emotion, number one, and then two, try to de-escalate that physical reaction going on.
Okay.
And as you're doing that, then you're going to have the opposite response. Now, the really good news after that is if you can start taking it the parasympathetic nervous system way, you're going to drop your cortisol levels. And that's also very good.
Cortisol levels are the stress hormone.
Yeah,
right?
we're starting to drop the things that are getting us all triggered. It's actually the science behind keeping it cool. How do you do that?
The science behind keeping it cool.
Or keeping your cool, right? Brackett calls these moments meta moments, where it's like you pump the emotional brakes for a second and you say, okay, I've got this onset of this strong emotion occurring. Let me give it a second to try to redirect the body response to de-escalating, essentially. That's a good thing.
Okay, so those are just the first couple tools. So tune in, check out that full episode of 58, Keeping Your Cool, and learn how to keep it in check.
Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please remember to rate, share, and subscribe to our podcast. And thank you for listening to Asking for a Friend.
Let us know what you thought of the episode. Our email is hello@afafpodcast.com. This show is for educational purposes only and is copyrighted. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. Thanks for listening to Asking for a Friend with TalkDoc.